Good morning and welcome to our special coverage of the Russian-Ukraine invasion. I'm Ladi Akiri. The headlines. United Nations Secretary General criticizes attacks on hospitals in Ukraine as Russian invasion enters day 15. World Health Organization confirms 18 attacks on health facilities in Ukraine, including on children's and maternity hospitals. An array of hope as underground young singer emphasizes hope in the midst of gloom. We begin today with the many condemnations trailing the bombing of a children's hospital and maternity ward in Mariupol, Ukraine. The United Nations chief, Antonio Guterres, called the attack horrific. The attacks wounded at least 17 people, leaving children and others trapped under the rubble. Ukraine accused Russia of carrying out the bombardment on the medical facility when a ceasefire was meant to be in place. Mr. Guterres says civilians are paying the highest price for a war that has nothing to do with them, and says this senseless violence must stop and end the bloodshed now. In the meantime, the World Health Organization has verified numerous attacks on health facilities, health workers, and ambulances, including 10 deaths and 16 injuries in Ukraine. Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, the Director General of the WHO, also says that these attacks are depriving whole communities of health care. Dr. Ghebreyesus also asked Russia to commit to a peaceful resolution to the crisis and to allow safe, unimpeded access to humanitarian assistance for those in need.
So far, WHO has delivered 81 metric tons of supplies, and WHO is establishing a pipeline of supply.
Their own country with the best possible selection of anti-tank weapons and anti-air defense systems.
International Affairs analyst Johanna LeBlanc joins us now for more on this. She is in Washington, D.C. Nice to see you, Johanna. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
First direct question. Why is NATO trying to avoid a direct confrontation with Russia? Because there are some analysts who say that will probably be one of the few ways that this can be brought to an abrupt end.
I think the idea is that the world does not want to go to war, right? Even here in the United States, I think that while the crisis in Ukraine is grave and it's severe, it's obviously a humanitarian crisis, but the notion of going to war is not something that NATO countries are willing to bet on, because we know what war does, right? It costs lives. We have to send our children, our sons, our daughters, and people just want. I think NATO countries just want to find a diplomatic solution to this crisis without having to go to war.
Now, the Russian president has been very direct and has been very firm in what he wants to see to end this. One of that is a guarantee from the United States and other allied powers that the Ukraine will not be allowed to join either NATO or the EU. And he says unless he gets that guarantee, he is going to keep up with this. That is a deal breaker, is it? Or is there a way of going around that to give him some kind of assurance, because he seems hell-bent on this?
I think the economic sanctions that have been imposed on Russia will add significant pressure, because at the end of the day, we know these sanctions will further cripple the country's economy. Just today, the U.S. passed legislation to ban energy imports from Russia, and we see the oil ban. We see a number of other economic sanctions, which will have a tremendous economic impact on the country's economy. So I think at some point, Russia, President Putin will have to look at and say, hey, am I going to continue with aggression, with war, or am I going to allow my people to suffer? Because as we know, sanctions don't impact people at the highest level, right? It impacts the ordinary people, the children, the mothers, the family, your day-to-day workers. So I think these sanctions that are being imposed by the U.S. and other member nations will add the pressure that is needed in order for Putin to rethink his strategy.
The other way of looking at this, of course, is to say that if the sanctions cripple Russia's economy and so on, then its top command is likely to become more difficult to negotiate with. And so the hopes of diplomacy winning out at the end of the day, especially for people who are now crippled, may also be a tall order.
I would disagree. I think that when Putin starts to really look at the reality, and I'm sure that Putin strategizes. He and his team looked at the pros and the cons of if he were to engage in war and hostilities with Ukraine, what are the possible outcomes? So I'm sure all of these sanctions were anticipated. But again, I really believe that these sanctions will cause Putin to be more engaged in diplomatic talks with NATO countries and obviously the United States.
Let's look at things from Ukraine's perspective now. Ukraine is desperate. It's calling for a no-fly zone because right now its skies are virtually under Russian control and the bombardments are heavy. The civilian toll is quite heavy, but its allies prefer to send it other kinds of weapons. Is it in a position that some might describe as short or medium term untenable because Russia is simply too strong?
I agree with you, but however, I think we have to look at it again from the perspective of these other nations. If, let's say, the United States were to send ammunition to Ukraine, that's war, and Russia would attack. And we know Russia has very sophisticated ways of attacking other nations, not the ordinary ways of war and bombing. It could be done through cyber attacks, right? And we saw what happened during our last elections, how our systems were hacked. And I think there's a great fear by NATO countries and other countries across the world of possible cyber attacks by Russia. So countries have to be very strategic in how they engage in this war between Ukraine and Russia. And secondly, there are impacts to this war, such as the cost of gas. Here in America, we see the gas pumps. It's getting more and more expensive each and every day. It is estimated that by next week, we're going to be paying $6 a gallon. So I think these types of strategies were intended by Putin because he knows the position that his country plays in terms of delivering fuel to the rest of the world. So I think at some point, again, nations will have to look at what is happening in their country and how can they work with Putin and Ukraine to ensure that we find a diplomatic resolution to this crisis. But also, I think this is a great opportunity for African nations like Nigeria, Libya, Angola to provide oil to the rest of the world.
Before I let you go, I must ask you then, I mean, it looks like from what you've analyzed, there's incentive for both sides to end this as quickly as possible. How do you think they should go about that?
First, I think that there needs to be a conversation with all the NATO allies. I think they need to sit down and have a frank conversation on what is it that Putin wants versus what Ukraine wants, right? And I think diplomacy works when you have the right people at the table, the right partners, when you have heads of states who are willing to engage in authentic conversations and negotiate in good faith. It can work. It can work if the parties put the interest of the people first versus their own personal interest. Because we know war, it's about ego, right? The ego plays a critical role. While we understand that Putin argued that if Ukraine were to join NATO, it will be disastrous for his nation from a national security perspective, which some would agree and some obviously would disagree. But I think, again, diplomacy is the way to go, and these sanctions that are being imposed will force Putin to withdraw out of this war to ensure that the people of Ukraine are able to defend themselves. And obviously, the people of Russia could be able to pursue life, liberty, and happiness, because right now, with all of these sanctions being imposed, the economy is going to be severely crippled.
Indeed, it looks like interesting times ahead. One can only hope that diplomacy will win out, as you suggest. Thank you so much, Yana LeBlanc, for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
We'll take a break, and when we return, we'll have more stories on the various reactions and actions relating to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Please stay on with us. Welcome back to the program. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is commending the decision to halt the certification of the Russian pipeline project Nord Stream 2 to counter Russia's intimidation of Europe. Mr. Trudeau said at an event in Berlin organized by the Transatlantic think tank and the Munich Security Conference, Russia's actions are a massive threat to Europe and the world. Mr. Trudeau also underlined the importance of democracies working together in unity to fight authoritarian regimes.
He doesn't continue. When Vladimir Putin launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, he violated Russia's international treaties, and he attacked the values that form the pillars of all democracies. This kind of brazen disregard for law and human life is a massive threat to Europe and to the world. Whether it's the immediate challenge of high gas prices or the long-term consequences of climate change, democracies need to be at their best to have the tough conversations needed to figure that out. Earlier today, Germany signed on to Canada's Global Carbon Pricing Challenge, and Canada signed on to Germany's Climate Club. Now, not only do we both have a price on pollution at home, we'll both be driving this work on the world stage, too. Canada and Germany are also two of the world's biggest economies. So when we stand united on something, it matters. After all, as this crisis in Ukraine has laid bare, we must keep working together. I know that European leaders have been calling for acceleration in the shift to clean, sustainable power as Putin tries to hold a continent of homes hostage over oil and gas. So I want to commend the leadership of Chancellor Scholz to halt the certification of Nord Stream 2 Russian pipeline. This was not an easy decision, but it was the right decision. You will not bend to intimidation, and you will find a path forward on a secure and sustainable energy future. You've made your vision clear, and Canada will stand with you. Vladimir Putin made serious miscalculations. He underestimated the incredible courage of the Ukrainian people, and he underestimated the resolve and unity of democratic allies and partners in the face of authoritarianism.
China's foreign ministry is bashing Australia's intelligence chief, asking him to focus on domestic matters after his comments suggesting a collusion between China and Russia could result in a, quote, major power conflict. Andrew Scherer, Director General of the Office of National Intelligence, had said a troubling new strategic convergence had grown since Russia invaded Ukraine, adding that China's President Xi Jinping appears to be planning to dominate the Indo-Pacific region and use it as a base to overtake the United States as the world's leading power. But China said it was unaware of Mr. Scherer's remarks, but that the intelligence chief should pay more attention to Australia's disregarding of its commitment to non-proliferation as a result of the trilateral AUKUS agreement that will provide Australia with nuclear-powered submarines. Under a trilateral security partnership announced last year, Australia is to build at least 8 nuclear-powered submarines with US and British technology. The Biden administration welcomes U.S. companies who have stopped doing business in Russia in response to the country's invasion of Ukraine and would likely take steps if their assets were seized. This was made known by White House spokesperson Jen Psaki yesterday.
As of now, the Secretary Austin, Chairman Milley, and members of our Defense Department are in touch with Ukrainian counterparts, NATO counterparts, discussing what are clearly logistical challenges here. And I would note, Josh, that in the statement put out by my colleague at the Pentagon yesterday, he made clear that obviously the a proposal from yesterday that fighter jets manned by Americans departing a NATO base to fly into airspace contested with Russia raises serious concerns for the United States and NATO. So the logistical questions here, just to put a little fine point on it, are things like how do you get planes into Ukraine in a way that is not escalatory? And what are the logistics and operational details of that? Those are conversations are happening between counterparts at the military level, and I would expect any update might come from them.
Quite a lot of talking points in terms of economic implications. And I'm being joined here on the program by our business correspondent, Laddie Williams. Nice to see you, Laddie.
Great to see you, Laddie.
Let's start first with global markets.
Yeah.
Seems to be a link between what's going on there.
Yes, and the oil market. Yeah, yesterday, investors, were able to get a breather because Monday, Tuesday was quite red for most global markets. But yesterday, we saw the FTSE rise about 3.25%. In Asia, the Nikkei went up about 3.94%. Kospi 2.21%, and in the U.S. we also saw U.S. equities also go up. The Dow Jones Industrial Average that one went up 2%, S&P 2.57%. So it was all green, in global markets, and also the crypto market wasn't left out. We saw Bitcoin jump from about $39,000. It broke the $40,000 mark, climbed up to 42,000. But this morning, we're having, quite a pullback. But, investors got a breather. They were happy yesterday. But the issue now is most of these traders sell on rallies. So it remains to be seen how the market actually closes today.
So that there is a link between what happens with oil prices and the stocks, right?
Exactly.
So essentially, if prices of oil go up, then stocks
go down.
Exactly. And then the other way, if prices go up, and so a lot is tied to that.
Exactly.
You mentioned cryptocurrencies. How was that playing out? Because the last I checked, because quite a number of Russians invested in cryptocurrency, and a lot of Ukrainians also, and a lot of help is coming Ukraine's way by way of cryptocurrencies.
Yes,
right.
Yes.
How is that playing out?
So right now, the crypto market has a correlation with the NASDAQ, the tech-heavy NASDAQ. So whatever happens, with the NASDAQ market somehow trickles down into the crypto space. That's been happening for months now. So it's more like once you see, the global markets going up, somehow the crypto space starts to go up at the same time. There's this, correlation, and traders are taking advantage of that, reading other markets and using that to make their next move, in the crypto space. But, crypto got, good news yesterday with the executive order by U.S. President Joe Biden, setting out regulations, for the cryptocurrency market, which is a plus. It shows that, this market is getting attention, and America wants to take the lead, when it comes to, that market. So traders were really excited with that, and we saw that in the price jump yesterday with Bitcoin.
Now, last week, one of the ratings agencies downgraded Russia and Russia's stocks all the way down, and now it's Fitch's turn.
Yeah.
Fitch has downgraded Russia again. What can you tell us about this? That they're going to have a debt default.
Yes, exactly. So, with companies pulling out of, Russia at this point, most of these companies employ a huge chunk, of Russians, so them pulling out, that's increasing unemployment, in Russia at this point. And we also see more sanctions, rolling in, and, with the financial markets in Russia also in turmoil, at this time. It's easy to see that as it goes, it's hard for Russia to actually make money at this point. Now their main source of income, which is energy, we've seen the U.S. Stop imports of Russian oil, and now we see the UK also planning to end that by 2022. coupled with, well, you know, they still have Europe at this point. Germany, the biggest buyer, is still there. But, you know, as it looks at this point, we don't know what card Europe will play next, you know, but everyone is trying to wean off, you know, Russian energy. So the outlook is looking quite bleak, you know, at this point.
At this point, a lot to unwind and to unpack there. Of course, you gentlemen and lady,
right,
on the desk there have quite a lot of analysis to come right after this show.
Right.
There's
Yes,
Business Morning with
yeah.
Ini John McQuarrie will be on that, and then you will be on Business Incorporated later
yes.
in the day. Looking forward to that
Yeah.
very much, and how to see how this is
exactly, because all of
up.
this is affecting the commodities market, and we're going to be drilling down on some of these commodities on Business Incorporated and on Business Morning.
There is, of course, something that we talked about off air, which has direct impact in Nigeria immediately, which has to do with the question of fuel, which we alluded to the prices earlier.
Right.
For example, in Nigeria right now, diesel has gone all the way up.
All the way up, and they're expecting it to rise to about 1,000 naira per liter. And obviously, you know, diesel, most of these businesses use diesel. So if businesses are paying more overhead cost for diesel, that's going to trickle down into the price of their services and goods, meaning Nigerians are going to be paying more for stuff, inflation. And obviously, the word stagflation has already been thrown around
very
globally.
much so.
This
is also looking like it's going to be effective in terms of wheat. When we're talking about wheat, last week, Ini and I on this program talked about wheat and the possible long-term effect of that.
Exactly.
And already we're beginning to hear rumbles in that industry about people complaining and saying the prices are going high, where you can find it.
Exactly, because and also North Africa is another major, they're getting the major blow here because they are heavily reliant on Russian wheat. And, you know, at this point, you know, with all this supply disruptions, they're looking for alternatives at this point. But it's also trickling down to higher prices with bread at this point. I saw a headline today with Middle East and North African countries actually feeling the bite. You know, right now, bread is going up, and obviously, with the price of wheat going up, food security becomes an issue. You know,
and in many countries, bread is a staple.
In many countries, a staple. So it's a trickle-down effect, and even with feed millers too have use of wheat. You know, in Nigeria here. So one of the wheat, the millers I spoke to said right now he doesn't have any bag of wheat. He's actually, you know, looking for wheat, and the prices are going up, and obviously the other alternative is more expensive. So the ripple effect is
everywhere,
and it's everywhere. It's felt everywhere.
So interesting times ahead, Ladi. Looking forward to seeing you in the afternoon, and of course seeing Ini right after this show. But thank you for your time at this point.
Thank you.
Day 14 of the Russian invasion of Ukraine had been about the evacuations taking place in 6 major Ukrainian cities. Humanitarian corridors were opened to allow civilians flee. Bear in mind, Nigerians in Sumy have finally left. They left on Tuesday on buses and are now safely across the Hungarian border.
Within the small window of opportunity to flee Ukraine without hearing bombs going off, thousands make their way across various borders from Ukraine. At Medica, a border town close to the Ukrainian border with Poland, Polish soldiers and volunteers help people onto trains. Families with young children and elderly people carrying suitcases and wearing winter coats board trains specifically for refugees. Poland has received more than 1.3 million people since the war began on February 24. At the Siret border crossing near Romania, refugees carrying backpacks and dragging suitcases, some carrying pets, are received by firefighters and volunteers and helped onto buses at the border crossing point. First responders have also been handing out supplies. Dozens more arrive by ferry at the Romanian port of Isasir. Fleeing families stop over to continue their journeys through Europe in search of refuge outside of Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky, during his broadcast this morning, once again called on the international community to impose a no-fly zone over Ukraine, saying they, that's the international community, would be responsible for a mass humanitarian catastrophe if it did not do so. He said the threat level in Ukraine was at a maximum nearly 2 weeks into the Russian invasion, but that Ukrainians have shown they would never give in. Ukraine has pleaded with Western nations to provide it with fighter jets to counter Russia's invasion, which has forced more than 2 million refugees to flee the country. U.S. lawmakers have responded by pushing President Joe Biden's administration to facilitate the transfer of aircrafts. And while Russia's defense ministry has released a video showing a military column on the move outside Ukraine, it also says over 120 tons of humanitarian aid from the country's Tula region have been delivered to residents in Ukraine's second-largest city, Kharkiv. Among the humanitarian aid are food, drinking water, medicines, clothes and beddings. Shipped to Kharkiv under the escort of Russian troops, the aid is mainly for women and children and the seniors. On the sidelines, Russia has demanded that the United States explain to the world why it supported what Moscow calls a military biological program in Ukraine involving deadly pathogens, including plague and anthrax. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova demanded transparency from Washington over the allegation, which is denied by Kyiv and which a Pentagon spokesperson has described as absurd. She said evidence of the alleged program had been uncovered by Russia during what it calls a special military operation in Ukraine. Zakharova said Russia had documents showing that the Ukrainian Health Ministry had ordered the destruction of samples of plague, cholera, anthrax and other pathogens after February 24. China, Russia's ally, says US-led NATO has pushed the conflicts between Russia and Ukraine to the volcanic crater step by step. Addressing a press conference, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian says the U.S. government in recent days spread false information against China incessantly on the Ukraine issue, attempting to transfer the conflicts, provoke confrontations, and reap gains by doing so. Amid growing Western sanctions on Russia, President Vladimir Putin on Tuesday signed a decree introducing special economic measures to ensure Russia's security in the field of foreign trade. Putin instructed the government to draw up within 2 days a list of commodities and raw materials banned from export and import. The ban will be in effect until December 31st, according to the decree.
We'll take yet another break, and when we return, we'll be on the closing stretch of the program this morning, where we'll tell you about the hope amidst the gloom. Thanks for staying with us. Reports say refugees are reporting that the international students fleeing Ukraine are dying by the side of the road from hypothermia and heart attacks after being stuck for days in the snow and having guns pointed at them by Ukrainian soldiers. The reports say thousands of students from Africa, South Asia, and the Middle East are trying to flee the invasion of Ukraine into neighboring countries like Poland and Hungary. But the United Nations had said on Tuesday that black and brown refugees are facing racism at the borders. Dozens of refugees who recently made it through into Poland have been speaking about being racially abused and treated worse as they tried to escape. There were more than 70,000 international students in Ukraine when the war broke out, including many training to be doctors or nurses. Well, one person who isn't in Ukraine but whose heart is still in the Ukraine is Ife Idowu, a Nigerian who was able to flee to Hungary. Nice to speak with you, Ife, even though the circumstances are less than auspicious. Thank you for speaking with us.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Where exactly are you in Hungary?
I'm in Budapest. I'm in a hotel and it's paid
In
for by the
Budapest.
government. Yeah.
What was your experience like getting out of Ukraine into Hungary?
Yeah, well, for me, I drove down here. I had to drive about 1,600 kilometers. And usually it was supposed to be a 19-hour journey, but it took me 2 days to get here because of traffic, and a lot of people were fleeing, and there were thousands of checkpoints on the way. So yeah, it was just normal to get here in 2 days. I mean, some people took more, but I just had to leave. I drove all through the day and night just to get here.
Now, you say you drove. I'm taking that to mean that you were in your own car and you drove this distance.
Yeah, I drove that distance.
Wasn't that dangerous? Were you alone?
Yeah, it was dangerous. I was alone in the car. I mean, I drove throughout alone. It was dangerous. They let me know it was dangerous, but I had to leave. I mean, I just had to leave.
When you say you had to leave, what was the situation just before you left?
Before I left, it was calm. It was okay, but after the first explosion, I thought I was still going to stay behind. And then not until one morning, the explosion was close to my house. I opened the windows and there was smoke everywhere. My parents were disturbing me, I would say it like that. They just said I had to leave. And I had a family, man. I have a family. And we're separated right now. I mean, it's not cool, you know. So living was difficult. I mean, right now, I don't even know where we are. So I left, I just got in the car and I drove off.
Now, we're hearing reports. We're hearing reports that those who are trying to flee, particularly those from Africa, African students and workers and so on, trying to flee, apart from the danger that the invasion or the war has brought about, they're also facing racism at the border, both from the Ukrainians and the Russians. Did you experience any of this, or do you know anyone who says he or she has?
Well, to be honest, no. Most of us should understand that if we were in the same situation, we'll save our people first. But sometimes people misunderstand these things as racism. Yeah, there's racism, okay? But we should know, of course, that there are people who will be priorities first. I did not witness any racism. I did not go through Lviv border to get to Poland. We knew that there were lots of people going to Poland, so we chose another border that was Hungary. So here there are less people coming to this region. That was why I chose this side. It's a longer drive, but I mean, I got here. There was nobody on the queue. They processed me in 15 minutes, and that was it.
Now, the other thing, of course, that I want to ask is that there's big news about evacuations out of Poland, out of Hungary, and other such places, Romania, by Nigerian authorities to bring Nigerians like yourselves back home. Are you planning on taking advantage of that? And if so, how?
No, I'm not planning on taking any advantage of going anywhere. For now, I want to be here. I want to be close to my family. I mean,
where's your family? Where is your family?
They're back in Zaporizhia.
That's in the Ukraine?
Yeah, they're still in the Ukraine.
How come you left without them?
You do the same in my shoes. I don't want to go into the details now, but it wasn't an easy thing to do. They are strong patriots, and they said they would rather die in the country than live somewhere else as refugees.
Oh, let me get it straight. You're married to a Ukrainian?
No, I'm not married.
Okay, so when you say that, what do you mean?
I'm not married yet. We're...
My apologies if I sound inquisitive. It's just that it's difficult to explain how you left and left behind people who are so dear and so close to you.
We're courting. Let me use it that way, yeah. We're not married officially yet.
Oh, okay. I think I understand that. So your mind is still in the Ukraine because they're still there, even though you are
100%.
in Hungary.
100%. The moment I hear that the war bell is over, I'm driving back to Ukraine. My heart is in Ukraine.
This is a different experience from those of others that we've spoken, other Nigerians who have spoken
that's why
to.
I said my situation is complicated, but it's life.
Let me ask you about others. If your situation is as you've explained it, and you've also said that you're just waiting for the situation to improve and change, you're going back. So the question of evacuating does not refer to you.
No.
Others that you know, other Nigerians that you know who were trapped in other parts of the Ukraine and who are trying or who were trying to and have some cases succeeded in getting out. What are the experiences that have related to you? Do you know anything about them? And if some of them have in fact left for home?
Well, most of my friends have been here too for a very long time, and I don't think anyone I know is planning on going back to Nigeria. Instead, we're using this opportunity to get deep down into Europe and use the programs that they've prepared for us. But I don't want to do any of that now. I just want to go back to Ukraine. Some people have gone to Germany, some have gone to Austria, some have gone to Italy. I mean, the United Nations they've done a really, really great job for refugees, and people are using that opportunity. And I'm just grateful to them. I mean, we're living here free, they're feeding us and all that. So yeah, I don't know what to say. I'm just
You're just grateful. Grateful to be alive and hopeful that at a point in time you'll be reunited with your family.
Yeah, 100%.
We join you in saying amen to that. Ifeanyi, thank you for your time this morning and very best of luck to you.
Thank you very much, too. Bye. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Ifeanyi speaking to us from Budapest in Hungary. Britain's Prince William and his wife Kate have paid a visit to a Ukrainian social club that had been gathering donations to support people fleeing Ukraine since Russia's invasion. The British royals spoke to people coordinating the relief efforts as they stood surrounded by piles of boxes packed with items including clothes and medical equipment. The British royal family do not usually comment on major political matters, sticking to a constitutional norm that it should remain neutral. However, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge had said that they stood with the people of Ukraine as they, quote, bravely fight the invasion by Russia, a rare public comment for British royals on political issues. Russian Formula One driver Nikita Mazepin has set up a foundation to support any athletes unable to compete due to political reasons after his contract was terminated by Haas following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Mazepin was billed to line up for Haas for a second straight season alongside Mick Schumacher after the FIA ruled to allow Russian drivers to race as neutrals. However, when Motorsport UK decided to bar Russian-linked competitors from racing in Britain, Haas terminated his contract with immediate effect.
I have been very relieved to see that FIA has allowed athletes to compete on a neutral status. And I was hoping, and to be honest, the hope was feeling close, that I will be able to compete. But obviously, 5th of March at 11:45 Moscow time, things really changed, and I lost my dream, which I was working towards for 18 years of my life. I'm announcing the creation of a foundation that will be devoted to helping athletes who, for political reasons, out of their control, lost their ability to compete at the highest level. It will be funded by Eurocali, using the money that had been intended for Formula One sponsorship this season. The foundation will allocate resources, both financial and non-financial, to those athletes who have spent their lives preparing for Olympics or Paralympics or other top events, only to find that they were forbidden from competing and collectively punished just because of the passports they held. We will work to find jobs to provide worthy incomes, as many of these athletes have been counting on sponsorships following their championship performances, which did not happen. We will also provide legal aid in cases where athletes wish to argue their status in sport. We will help them psychologically to cope with the sense of loss and emptiness that comes with being excluded from the sport that they love.
And just before we go, hope amidst the gloom, a young girl entertaining people sheltering in a bomb shelter by singing the hit song Let It Go from the Disney film Frozen. In video posted on social media, the girl, identified as Amelia, age 7, stood up in front of people packed into a shelter, and she began to sing in a clear voice. The crowd fell quiet, and some filmed the young performer. The video was filmed at an undisclosed location in Ukraine by Martis Mikova, who was given permission to film by Amelia's mother. Yina Menzel, who sang the song in the movie, tweeted, "We see you, we really, really see you," and followed her message with 2 hearts of blue and yellow, the colors of Ukraine's flag. After she finished her rendition of song, the crowd applauded, and the young singer looked around at the audience and giggled, holding her hands to her face.
Пора узнать, что я могу, на помощь призову к себе. Во льдах навечно отпусти и забудь, что прошло уже не вернуть. Отпусти и забудь, новый день укажет путь.
Браво, браво, умница!
A rare glimpse of hope in what has been so far a torrid tale. But that's how we end our program this morning. There'll be another segment of Russian invasion at 5 later on in the day. Do join us for that. And the show will be back tomorrow at 9 o'clock. I'm Ladi Akiridulali. Do have a pleasant day.